Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are watching this out there on the World Wide Web. This is Jeremy Geelan for SYS-CON TV. I have Doug Barbin with me here at the 5th Cloud Expo in New York City, Director of SAS-70 Solutions. SAS-70 Solutions, Doug, you're probably getting a lot of flack about, compliance. Why do we have to worry about such things? But you can't shoot the messenger, can you? It's pretty darned important in cloud computing.
It is. It's something that you have to do. It's something that service providers have had to do for years, especially if they would provide services, cloud services, ASP services to any company that's publicly traded, has credit card data, healthcare data, and so forth. It's a necessary evil.
And I mean, do you have situations where you come in and there is that sort of hostility? Do we actually have to go through this, or have people now wised up? I'm certainly noticing a change on my side of the industry that people embrace it. It's going to be a differentiator. If you haven't got that in order, your house isn't in order.
Well, there's a lot of different, there's many different assurance and compliance tools and frameworks that are out there. I think on the SAS-70 side, that's been around for almost 2 decades, and it's a requirement to do business. You see it in RFPs. You can't provide a service unless you've undergone that audit. I think where people are starting to move into that have been resisting is the payment card industry, the credit card data and so forth, different things related to financial healthcare data and so forth. I think it's all of the new standards and so forth that are very young, that it's an additional cost, it's an additional burden to a service provider. So you do exactly what you have to do to get business and so forth, and the companies that are leading are the ones that are out there being most aggressive and undergoing the most extensive sets of audits and reviews and so forth.
And yeah, it becomes a differentiator that we've exposed ourselves even more than the other guys.
That's right. Yeah. That's right. Absolutely. So.
Question sort of as a layman and as a consumer, of course, of cloud services. How do I reassure myself that the audit process is transparent, is independent? I mean, how does that all work? How does a company do an audit on another company? I mean, sure. It's not the government.
Right, right. Well, it starts where, and this is, I think, where some of the cloud providers have the largest challenge. It starts with them providing a description of what they do. What is the control environment? How am I protecting your data? How am I making sure that the service that I'm providing to you is operating as advertised? It's a lot about security, but it's also about operations and reliability as well. Two from that is once the cloud provider has told you what they do to protect your data, to make the service reliable, how do you prove it? What steps have they taken to bring in an independent third party to say, all right, we've reviewed your systems, we've reviewed your security, and it's operating as effectively as it should be. And so that's where your SAS-70 audits, your PCI compliance audits, ISO certifications, different mechanisms like that come into play as to say, okay, this is what we say we do, and this is how we're proving it. So.
And do you have to still evangelize around that alphabet soup? I mean, is it getting just so well known by the right people that you don't, or are there still?
Whenever it gets better and more well known, then all of a sudden the standards change their names or numbers. I mean, it's
by definition.
SAS-70 actually is changing this year to SSAE-16 and an international standard as well. So there's a new alphabet soup and set of numbers that are coming along the pike as well.
But I mean, I sort of again, just at the sidelines there, I think I detect an increased tolerance to this, an increased acceptance. You know what? It's what it is, and what are we going to do? We have to give assurances.
Sure, yeah, and all you have to do is look at an RFP for cloud services, and it says must have gone through, must be SAS-70 compliant, which is actually a misnomer, but must have gone through a SAS-70 audit, must meet the PCI data security standard, and so forth. It's a needs to do in business. It's like having, air conditioning in your house.
So. You can't say something like that's a misnomer without an interviewer jumping on it and saying, how can such a thing? You can't be SAS-70 compliant?
It's not a prescriptive standard. That's actually probably the single most misunderstood thing about SAS-70 is that it doesn't say anything about how long your password should be. It doesn't say anything about how you should encrypt data. SAS-70 is an audit standard, and it's meant to guide auditor to auditor communications such that the whole purpose was to eliminate reduce the number of audits. If I'm a service provider providing services to 100 companies, for instance. Right. I have 2 options. I can either go through 100 audits by their auditors or do a single audit that I could share. So SAS-70 governs the audit process and the framework
to make it comparable.
Exactly. To actually go through and do the assessment of the service organization. So the difference is, I think what's misunderstood is people expect SAS-70 to be a standard that has criteria that you can meet, like ISO or even like PCI, and it's not. It's a framework for auditing the controls that the service provider has in place.
So you see, you learn things on SYS-CON TV that you didn't know. But I mean, in a sense, it doesn't undermine it or anything. It's just that that one wants to be clear about it.
It's different. That's right. It's different. It's misunderstood, and press releases that say we're SAS-70 certified and so forth aren't exactly correct, because certification implies that you're meeting a specific set of criteria, which there are other sets of criteria that you can meet, obviously, and roll into that same audit. So
I've got to ask you the inevitable question, because you're here at the show, so you've got a better sense of how people are reacting this week to all of this. Any change from like the last show that you appeared at or the next show? Can you see changes in the industry and their approach towards you guys?
Yeah, I think that you mentioned it before, definitely a necessary evil. I think it's becoming much more widespread. I think that there were some trepidation in the past, but I think now what people are doing is they're using an umbrella of an audit like a SAS-70 to collect more information that can then be provided out to their customers. They're using that. They've recognized that it's an important vehicle to communicate to your end customers, and more things are getting rolled in, new standards, more criteria, different types of controls, whether it's fraud detection or things that you didn't traditionally look at from an audit perspective, are now being included in these audits, because it's the one it's kind of the one single mechanism that people are using to communicate to their end customers that what they're doing is secure and reliable. So.
Well, I'm looking at this in a whole new different way. So, we've made a virtue of necessity. I think you're very engaging in saying to people, this is, if you're not using SAS-70 solutions, you'll be looking at what these guys are providing for you. That's my plug for the week. Where could they go to? What's your website?
SAS-70, SAS70solutions.com. So.
That was simple, and you heard that from the man himself, Doug Barbin, director of said company. Thank you so much, Doug, for visiting with us, and thank you for watching this out there on the World Wide Web.